It's Wednesday. The war in Ukraine is intensifying. There's fresh American intel and more Russian troops and jets. Ukraine wants fighter jets, but the West won't give them. We'll explain why. India wants jets too, the passenger kind, and it's buying them, not one or two, but a whopping 470 planes. It is the biggest aviation deal in history, and it's making history in more ways than one. The leaders of the UK and the US say India is helping create millions of jobs for Brits and Americans. London's gratitude, though, won't go beyond words. It's not like they'll return the Kohinoor, although the new Queen consort will not wear it in her crown. They're selling it as a virtue. We'll tell you what it's about. And in China, a child attacked his father with a meat cleaver. The video has gone viral and triggered a debate about video game addiction. You don't want to miss the story? The headlines first. All's not well with China and Pakistan. First, they turned off the lights, and now the Chinese are shutting down part of their embassy in Pakistan. Temporary move, but it says a lot. Beijing recently advised its citizens to be extremely cautious while in Pakistan. Meanwhile, in Wuhan, a major protest is on over public health insurance reforms, of all things. This is a Chinese city where the pandemic began. In a surprising move, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon resigns. She is the longest-serving First Minister who took office in November 2014. In New Zealand, one calamity after another, a strong earthquake of 6.3 magnitude hits the country just days after Cyclone Gabriel wreaked havoc. And German carrier Lufthansa suffers a major IT outage, forcing it to cancel and delay many flights across airlines. Lufthansa is Europe's biggest airline group.
Game changers.
Our lead story tonight is from Ukraine. The war is intensifying, Russia is going all guns blazing, and Ukraine is losing ground. American intel says Russia is launching a big offensive, and they're throwing everything into it: soldiers, tanks, even fighter jets. The focus is on eastern Ukraine. The fighting has intensified in Bakhmut. It's a small Ukrainian city ravaged by the war. It is at the center of a fierce battle now. Russia wants to capture Bakhmut. Yesterday, Ukraine's forces, in fact, blew up a bridge there. They're trying to stop the Russian advance.
According to my friends who serve in Bakhmut, the situation is such that Russian troops can advance for one day. Then Ukrainian soldiers knock them out of these positions. There is no such thing as the enemy being able to gain a hold and dig in new positions. Our soldiers do not allow them to gain a hold in Bakhmut.
That was a Ukrainian soldier on the front lines. Both militaries have been fighting here since May last year. They've suffered heavy casualties. Now Russia is making a fresh but more aggressive push. But why Bakhmut? Why does Russia want to capture this small city of all places? Experts have a theory. Bakhmut could be a stepping stone. Once it is captured, Russia could make a bigger push in the east. One that targets Donetsk and Luhansk. Together, these two regions make up the Donbass. This is the main battlefield of the war. Last year, Russia declared that it had captured Donbass. Moscow staked a claim on 4 regions: Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The announcement was made by Vladimir Putin himself. In 2014, he had taken Crimea from Ukraine. But this time it was different. Even though Russia claimed these territories, it wasn't really in control of them. Russian troops were present and in charge in just a few areas. Towards the end of 2022, Russia controlled just 18% of Ukraine. And Kiev kept pushing back on the battlefield. But today, the Ukrainian forces are struggling. Zelensky himself admits this is a tough situation.
And of course, today, as every day, I was in touch with our military, our commanders. I had a few meetings. The situation on the front line, especially in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, remains very difficult. The battles are literally for every foot of Ukrainian land.
Despite support from the West, Ukraine is struggling and the NATO is worried. NATO Chief Stoltenberg says Ukraine is using up its ammunition quickly and the demand is high. The West may find it difficult, in fact, to keep up the supply. I have some numbers. Russia has been firing 20,000 artillery shells a day. 20,000 every day. What about Ukraine? 6,000 to 7,000 shells. This is the average. And it's high. Ukraine may run out of supplies. Its main ally, the US, is already making appeals.
Ukraine has urgent requirements to help it meet this crucial moment in the course of the war. And President Zelensky underscored Ukraine's need for more equipment at our last meeting in Ramstein.
Ukraine has urgent requirements, says Lloyd Austin. Stoltenberg says Western defense industries are under strain. This is a war of attrition. It is now all about bigger guns and more ammunition. And there's no end to Ukraine's demands. First the tanks, then fighter jets, now ammunition. The list continues to grow. Moscow is sending reinforcements too. Reports say Russia is amassing aircraft close to the Ukraine border. These are fixed-wing and rotary aircraft, basically fighter jets and choppers. They've been moved close to Ukraine's borders. Will Russia deploy its air power soon? Is an air attack now imminent? It's hard to say, but Russia seems to be preparing for one, and it's getting support from Belarus. Let me show you some pictures. These are Belarusian troops. They're training in Brest. It's a border city in Belarus. This training ground is just 4 kilometers away from Poland and about 50 kilometers from Ukraine. These troops are preparing for combat. They're practicing driving, parachuting, and combat scenes. But why are Belarusian troops getting combat ready? Do they plan to enter Ukraine? President Alexander Lukashenko is an ally of the Kremlin. He's made major concessions to Russia in the past. His country has been used by Russian troops as a launch pad. Is Lukashenko preparing for the next step? Will he be sending his troops into Ukraine? The soldiers say they're ready.
We are ready for any task, however difficult, if we have to defend our beloved Belarus. We will not give our beloved away. It is ours, our beloved, our only one.
Either way, the battle in Ukraine will intensify. What is the thinking in Moscow then? It sees NATO's growing involvement as a clear threat. Yesterday, the Kremlin sent out this message to the West.
First of all, NATO is an organization that is hostile to us and that proves this hostility every day. It is trying its best to make its involvement in the conflict around Ukraine as clear as possible. That's the first thing. Of course, this demands certain precautionary steps to be taken.
And it's not just the battle on the ground. The information war between Russia and the West is also intensifying. Here's the latest against Russia. A Yale University study. This study makes some disturbing claims. It says Russia is running a re-education camp for Ukrainian children. At least 6,000 children are said to be in these camps. The study says they're from Russian-occupied regions in Ukraine, like Donbass and Crimea. And what's the purpose of these camps? Political re-education. According to the study, the children are apparently being trained in Russian values. The US says these children were separated from their families.
In many cases, Russia purported to temporarily evacuate children in Ukraine under the guise of a free summer camp, only to later refuse to return the children and to cut off all contact with their families. Such actions obviously will have serious long-term implications on these children's development. The network of facilities which these children are sent is vast, spanning from Russia-occupied Crimea, across Russia itself, from the Black Sea region to its Far East.
Russia has challenged these claims. The Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. released a statement. It says these kids are orphans. I have that statement with me, and this is what it says. We do our best to keep underage people in families and in cases of absence or deaths of parents and relatives to transfer orphans under guardianship. We've not been able to verify either version, but we can say for sure that these children are collateral damage, and in the days and weeks ahead, there will be more like them. The fighting is intensifying as the war comes close to its first anniversary. There's a serious risk of this conflict spilling over. As Ukraine fights to regain lost territory, it is engaged on another front. This one is with its allies. It's the fighter jet front. Ukraine wants them, the West isn't giving them. Why are fighter jets such a big deal? Can they really change the course of this war? Why is the West reluctant, and why hasn't Russia used its jets yet? Tonight, we'll try to answer all these questions, starting with Ukraine's pain. It faces regular missile attacks from Russia. Its air defense system is holding up so far, but it cannot take down all Russian missiles. Western fighter jets can change that. They can improve Ukraine's ability to defend itself. Part 2 of the story. Russia isn't using its fighter jets yet. Well, they did in the initial days of the war and suffered significant setbacks. But that could change now. Russia is readying its jets. What happens if they enter Ukrainian airspace? So Ukraine is worried. It wants to be able to defend itself. Plus, the Russian Air Force is a formidable adversary. Western intelligence says the same. It says Russia still has, and I'm quoting, Russia still has a pretty significant air force. And it's amassing aircraft close to Ukraine. And that's not all. Russia has also mobilized 300,000 troops. It is set to be launching a fresh offensive, which is why Ukraine wants fighter jets to launch offensive operations, to take on Russia's air force, to target Russian troop concentrations. This could change the course of the war, but Ukraine's allies are not playing ball. You may ask why, and we'll tell you it's complicated. Sending fighter jets is not as easy as it sounds. They're not like German helmets or electric batteries. They're fighter jets. Sending them would be crossing a stern Russian red line. It would be an escalation by the West. A lot of politics and a lot of countries are involved. But Zelensky is not giving up. Last week, in the middle of the war, he toured Europe. He gave speeches and lobbied for jets, yet returned empty-handed. Some leaders, like Rishi Sunak, made feeble commitments. Others just said no. Ukraine is desperate. It is calling the jets wings of freedom. It wants the F-16 fighter jets from the US. Now, the US is Ukraine's biggest ally at the moment. Biden has put his money where his mouth is. $50 billion and counting, battle tanks, aid, military and political support. He's given all of it, but no fighter jets. Biden has refused the request. The US says Ukraine is not ready to operate such fighter jets, and that is true. Ukrainian pilots would require at least 6 months of training before they can fly the F-16s. And the training, in fact, could stretch for years. This is a problem not just with the F-16s, but almost every Western fighter jet. Also, sending F-16s would be unprecedented. Washington will be risking direct conflict with Moscow. It could land NATO in a direct fight with Russia. And this is a red line that Joe Biden does not want to cross. What about the UK? Well, they're exploring possibilities. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has reportedly instructed his defense secretary to see what can be done. Ukraine wants the Typhoon fighter jets. Again, easier said than done. The Typhoon jets are made by the 4-country Eurofighter consortium. So the UK will first need an approval from the 3 other countries involved, Italy, Spain and Germany. And that will take a while if it happens at all. And then we have Germany, always skeptical about sending weapons to Ukraine. It relented on the issue of tanks, but jets may be too much to ask for. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said a firm no. In fact, he went further and complained about Western countries. Then there's France. President Emmanuel Macron gave Ukraine a reality check. He said that even if Europe agrees to give jets, they won't be available anytime soon. And by the time they are, it could be too late. Ukraine's closest ally, Poland, is also unsure. President Duda has said that sending F-16s would be, quote-unquote, a very serious decision, one that was not easy to take. His words. Which brings us to Russia. Russia has a big air force, the 3rd largest in the world, with more than 3,800 military aircraft. If fighter jets can be game changers, and Russia has so many of them, why isn't it using the jets? The fact is, Russia did use jets and lost them. At least 67 aircraft so far. Russia's air force has not delivered yet. It couldn't destroy Ukraine's air defense systems. Then the West sent support. It gave Ukraine air defense systems. The US, the UK, the Germans, all of them, they chipped in. America's Stinger missiles helped. Coupled with Ukraine's S-300 batteries, they made an effective air defense system. So Russia did not go full throttle with its air force, and Ukraine doesn't have the jets to mount a meaningful offensive. This is where the story stands. The West is being wise for a change by not adding fighter jets to the mix. staying in the jet space, let's talk about the biggest deal in aviation history, the Air India deal. We told you about this yesterday, but we want to discuss it again today because so much has happened since, and there's so much to be told. This is the mother of all aviation deals. Air India is an Indian carrier, now a private Indian carrier. It has placed a massive order. It is buying 470 planes in one go. A lot has been said about the potential of this deal and what it means for Air India and its rivals. But tonight, I want to focus on a different aspect, on what this deal means for India, what it says about India's position and stature, about the rise of India as an economic power and the global impact of homegrown brands. Let's start with the basics. Why is Air India doing this, buying 470 planes at once? Because it wants to be the comeback kid. The airline was founded by the Tatas in the 1930s. It was India's flagship international carrier. It was nationalized in the year 1953, controlled by the government for nearly 7 decades, which led to the downfall of the airline. By the end of it, it became a liability. Air India had a giant pile of debt, and government bailouts became an annual offer. The service was poor, to say the least. The privatization of the beleaguered airline was long pending. The Modi government finally did it. Bids were invited. The Tatas came out on top. Last year, they took back control of Air India, and now they're trying to turn it around. The airline will have a new fleet of planes, 250 from Airbus, 220 from Boeing, 470 planes in all. It is an ambitious bid to take on the best in the business, the likes of Emirates and Qatar Airways. The scale of the deal is massive, and its impact goes well beyond the Indian skies. Yesterday, 4 world leaders weighed in on this deal. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and finally US President Joe Biden. Prime Minister Modi and President Macron met virtually. Prime Minister Sunak and President Biden released statements. But they were all talking about one thing, the impact that this order from India will have on their economies. I'll start with President Macron. He talked about what France has achieved with India.
Once again, this achievement shows that Airbus and all its French partners, including Safran, are fully dedicated to develop new areas of cooperation with India, and we've achieved so much with India. I mean, in a wide range of sectors, from space to cyber, from defense to culture, from health to energy transition, and now we have the historic opportunity to go much further, given the potential of Indian and the Indian people.
Macron spoke about the potential of India. The statements that followed underscored this, like the one from Rishi Sunak. He emphasized on how the deal will create jobs in the UK. Look at what Sunak said on Twitter. With wings from Broughton and engines from Derby, this deal will support jobs around the country. The official statement from London gave more specifics. And I'm quoting again, the wings will be designed in Filton and assembled in Broughton, which is expected to bring an additional 450 manufacturing jobs and more than £100 million of investment to Wales. £100 million is around $120 million US. The same statement calls India, quote unquote, a major economic power. You could say the revenge on the Raj is now complete. A British Prime Minister of Indian origin hailing an Indian company for creating jobs in the United Kingdom. The Americans are grateful too. Look at what Joe Biden said about this deal. And I'm quoting again. The purchase will support over 1 million American jobs across 44 states, and many will not require a 4-year college degree. Again, an American president highlighting how a deal with India will benefit Americans. When did you last hear something like this? Biden also spoke with Prime Minister Modi over the phone. Later, the White House press secretary briefed the media.
The president spoke with the Prime Minister of India earlier today. They discussed the historic agreement for Air India to purchase over 200 American-made aircraft from Boeing. President Biden noted how the sale will support over 1 million American jobs across 44 states and help Air India meet growing demands for air transportation in India.
Again, the emphasis is on jobs. What about India? What are the gains for the Indian aviation sector here? India aspires to become an aviation hub, especially for maintenance and repairs. Yesterday, Prime Minister Modi said India's aviation sector is ripe for expansion.
निकट भविष्य में भारत एविएशन सेक्टर में विश्व का तीसरा सबसे बड़ा मार्केट बनने जा रहा है। कई आकलनों के अनुसार भारत को अगले 15 वर्षों में 2000 से अधिक विमानों की आवश्यकता होगी। आज की ऐतिहासिक घोषणा इस बढ़ती मांग को पूरा करने में सहायक होगी। भारत की मेक इन इंडिया, मेक फॉर द वर्ल्ड विजन के तहत एरोस्पेस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में अनेक नए अवसर खुल रहे हैं।
Air India's comeback coincides with the rise of India. It highlights India's growing economic might and its influence on the world at large. To Air India, we say, good luck. It's time to take on the world. Vantage continues after a short break.
This announcement also reflects the strength of the US-India economic partnership. Together with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I look forward to deepening our partnership even further as we continue to confront shared global challenges, creating a more secure and prosperous future for all our citizens. So this is Amrit Kal, as we've been saying, and this is a new chapter because, if you go back to the 70s or even the 60s, it was almost unimaginable to see or even envision a deal like this. And today we're awaiting the order of almost 470 aircrafts, about 250 from Airbus and over 200 from Boeing. So it also speaks a lot as to where India is positioned as far as the global map is concerned and how Prime Minister Modi also is seen as a leader and the power vision that he has for the country at large.
Ridhima, also after this landmark deal, what impact will it have on the global front? Like this is a historic deal. How will now the world now see India as?
As I was pointing out, Anjali, this is significant, right? It's not just the aviation sector that is closely watching deals like this, but also on the global map. As I said, if you go back about 40 to 50 years, a deal like this was unimaginable. And that is why yesterday was seen as a landmark day. It was seen as one of the biggest deals in aviation history. We don't remember the last time we spoke about a bulk order of over 450 aircrafts. And once again, going back at the cost of sounding repetitive, even if you heard that video conferencing and we put out those sound bites as well, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said exactly this. He called Narendra Modi his friend Narendra. It spoke significantly about the friendship between both the countries and where the ties between both the countries stand. Similarly, what we heard from
India is taking on China too by calling out its hypocrisy. Several countries around the world are facing a debt crisis. In South Asia alone, 2 countries are in trouble. Sri Lanka is already bankrupt. Pakistan could be next. Both of them owe money to China. So any IMF bailout is impossible without involving China. But so far, China has not moved an inch. It refuses to play ball. It refuses to sign the debt restructuring plans. It continues to block any debt relief, even when the stability of these countries is at risk. India is calling out China's hypocrisy now. Amitabh Kant is India's G20 Sherpa, and he has spoken out about China's role. Listen to what he said. China needs to come out openly and say what their debt is and how to settle it. It can't be that the International Monetary Fund takes a haircut and it goes to settle Chinese debt. How is that possible? Everybody has to take a haircut. What is Mr. Kant talking about? He's referring to the debt restructuring plans. Let me explain. When countries move the IMF for a bailout, they usually need to get other debtors on board, other countries from whom they've taken money. They must be on board. What for? To restructure existing loans, to change the terms of repayment, which might mean extending the period of the loan or lowering the interest rate, maybe even forgiving a certain amount of debt. That's how it works. When countries go bankrupt, every creditor takes a haircut, a loss on the debt recovery. But China wants to be paid back every penny. Take the case of Sri Lanka. It has been waiting for a bailout for months now. But Beijing is dragging its feet. China is among the biggest bilateral lenders of Sri Lanka. By the end of 2021, Colombo owed more than $7 billion to the Chinese. That's almost 20% of Sri Lanka's external debt, total external debt. 20% is owed to the Chinese. So China will have a say in the process. And for them, having a say perhaps means dictating terms. Countries like India are ready to forgive some of the debt, but not China. China is only offering to extend the repayment schedule, add more years to the loan. The message to Colombo is quite simple. You can pay us late, but you have to pay us in full. Do you know what that means? It means that the IMF bailout, one way or the other, will end up in Chinese pockets. China is behaving like a loan shark, and this is very dangerous because China is the biggest bilateral lender to developing countries. About 60% of low-income countries are in a crisis. They're either facing a debt crisis or they're at high risk of one. Leaders of the G7 have called on China to help, but Beijing has paid no heed to these calls. Now, India is stepping up. This year, India is serving as the president of the G20, and it is using this position to help other countries, to put pressure on China. Reports say India is drafting a proposal. What does it say? It will call on lenders, including China, to take a haircut on large loans. The proposal will be presented to the G20 countries. A meeting is scheduled for next week. Finance ministers and central bank chiefs from all G20 nations will participate. The Indian city of Bengaluru will play host to this. China has issued a statement about it, and this is what it says. China takes the debt issue of developing countries seriously and supports relevant financial institutions to put forward solutions. It is our consistent stance that multilateral financial institutions and commercial creditors, which hold the bulk of the debt of developing countries, should participate in the debt relief efforts. But on the proposal, China is yet to spell out where it stands. Can Beijing really afford to be isolated when the majority is on board and they back debt relief to distressed countries? The ball is in Beijing's court. Meanwhile, in Canada, anti-India attacks continue. The latest one targeted a Ram temple. This is a prominent temple in Canada's Mississauga. It was defaced on Tuesday. It's the second such incident in less than 3 weeks. Pro-Khalistan outfit Seeks for Justice is said to be behind this. India has strongly condemned the act and called on Canada to take action. Remember, Canada has one of the largest populations of Indian immigrants, close to 2 million people. But its leaders, guided by domestic political interests, have let anti-India groups flourish. New Delhi has made its displeasure clear. Canada tried to reset the relationship. Last week, their foreign minister was in India to repair the ties, but attacks like these will render diplomatic outreach meaningless. Our next report tells you more.
A complete reset. That was seen to be the primary aim when Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly visited India last week. She held a meeting with her Indian counterpart, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Ottawa wanted to mend ties with New Delhi, given the recent tensions between the two. Tensions due to Trudeau's brand of politics and the rising anti-India activities in Canada. A Ram temple in Mississauga was vandalized on Tuesday. Images on social media showed the walls of the temple defaced, painted with slogans like Hindustan Murdabad and terming militant leader Jarnail Bhindranwale a martyr. New Delhi took this up promptly with Canada. The Indian mission in Toronto tweeted, "We strongly condemn the defacing of Ram Mandir in Mississauga with anti-India graffiti. We have requested Canadian authorities to investigate the incident and take prompt action on perpetrators." What was Canada's response? "We're investigating the matter," they say. The mayor of Brampton said, "I'm saddened to hear of the hate-motivated vandalism at the Ram Mandir temple in Mississauga. This type of hate has no place in Peel region. Religious freedom is a charter right in Canada, and we will do everything we can to make sure everyone is safe in their place of worship." Pro-Khalistani group Seeks for Justice is said to be behind this. It's an anti-India group, infamous for such attacks, and for calling for a division of India. It advocates a separate state for Sikhs called Khalistan. For Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Sikhs are a crucial vote bank. He's been seen catering to extremist outfits, and that means, unlike India, Ottawa is hesitant to crack down. Canada's inaction has made it a hotbed for these elements to thrive. There have been repeated incidents of vandalism and threats to Indian immigrants. Last month, a Gauri Shankar temple in Brampton was defaced. In November 2022, radical outfits held a Khalistan referendum in Canada. In October 2022, a signboard named after the Bhagavad Gita was vandalized. In September, a Swaminarayan temple was targeted by Khalistani extremists. They chanted anti-India and anti-Hindu slogans. In August, a Punjabi radio jockey was grievously injured after being attacked by 3 people in Brampton. In April, an Indian student in Toronto was shot dead. Things reached a peak last year when New Delhi issued an advisory to all Indian nationals in Canada, requesting them to be vigilant. India has maintained strong diplomatic pressure on Canada to ensure the safety of Indians there and act against pro-Khalistan outfits. But Ottawa is yet to take action. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was famously given the cold shoulder during his visit to India in 2018. He toured the country without top Indian officials. His foreign minister's visit to New Delhi last week was meant to fix all of that. Canada wanted to make a fresh start with India. It believes New Delhi plays a key role in its new Indo-Pacific strategy that seeks to contain China. Both sides were looking to boost bilateral ties and investment, but the latest incident has played spoilsport. It has raised a question mark over Canada's fresh outreach and the reset it was seeking. India wants the Trudeau government to act.
The safety and well-being of Indian nationals in Canada is a priority for the government. The ministry and our mission and consulates in Canada regularly take up any untoward incidents related to the Indian community with the concerned Canadian authorities and request them to ensure proper investigation, identify the perpetrators, and impart justice.
The writing is on the wall for Canada. Before it looks to turn the corner, its words have to translate into meaningful actions, actions that will quell India's concerns.
Nikki Haley is running for president, the US president. She's an Indian American from the Republican Party. She announced that she's running for the White House. It's a long shot. Her adversaries include Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, and perhaps many more white men from the Republican Party, so it won't be easy. But who said politics was? First, an introduction. Who is Nikki Haley? She has many firsts to her name. Haley has served as the governor of South Carolina and the American ambassador to the United Nations. At 38, she was the youngest governor of a state and the first woman and person of color to lead South Carolina. Haley is the first person of Indian origin to have become a member of the presidential cabinet. Her parents belong to Amritsar in the Indian state of Punjab. They immigrated to the US. Haley was born in South Carolina. Do you know what Nikki Haley's real name is? Nimrata Nikki Randhawa. She was born a Sikh, but in her 20s, she converted to Christianity. Nikki Haley sounded pretty confident as she announced her presidential bid on Tuesday.
We must turn in that direction again. Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. That has to change. Joe Biden's record is abysmal, but that shouldn't come as a surprise. The Washington establishment has failed us over and over and over again. It's time for a new generation of leadership to rediscover fiscal responsibility, secure our border, and strengthen our country, our pride, and our purpose.
Let me also quote from what she said. "You should know this about me. I don't put up with bullies." Listen to this. "And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels. I'm Nikki Haley, and I'm running for president." I say, add this to your list of quotable quotes, and I'll tell you why she said this. The Republican Party is dominated by men, not just by any men, by white men. But Nikki Haley has broken glass ceilings in the past. Will she be able to do the same in her run for the White House? Remember, she's facing off the likes of Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, both Republican stalwarts. And just how Republican is Nikki Haley herself? Quite. She backed laws restricting abortion. She supports the death penalty. She isn't viewed as a friend of the LGBTQ community. She's known to oppose same-sex marriage. Under Donald Trump, she was the American ambassador to the United Nations. She knows her diplomatic chops. Nikki Haley is a hawk, especially when it comes to China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. But as of today, the outlook is not very promising for her. By throwing her hat into the Republican primary, she'll hurt Ron DeSantis more than Donald Trump. Why is that? Apparently, Haley has pulled support from Ron DeSantis, and that has put Donald Trump in the lead. In a head-to-head contest, Ron DeSantis had the upper hand, or has it? But it's not going to be a head-to-head contest within the Republican Party. As of now, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley are the only major Republican leaders to have announced their candidacy. DeSantis is expected to enter the race soon, and so is former Vice President Mike Pence. What about a direct contest between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley? According to polls, Trump holds a strong lead over her, a 54-27 lead. If it boils down to just DeSantis and Trump, DeSantis would win with a 4-point lead, at least according to polls right now. It may change later. In fact, DeSantis also holds a 1-point lead over Joe Biden, and Biden leads Trump by 6 points. But with more faces in the fray, the support will be divided and Trump may win the Republican contest. Now, all of this might be sounding very confusing to you. Why can't the Republican Party have just one presidential candidate? Well, it will, but only after the primaries are over. It's sort of an internal election. The winner of this contest will go on to fight the presidential election. And this winner will be announced sometime in June next year. So it's going to be a long road ahead. And by the way, Nikki Haley is not the first person of Indian origin to run for president. In 2015, Bobby Jindal tried his hand too. He was the governor of Louisiana. His campaign was a non-starter. Then there was Kamala Harris. She lost the primaries, but ended up as Biden's running mate and is now the vice president of the US. We're waiting to see how Nikki Haley's campaign unfolds and if America is ready for a brown woman president. And talking about Indian origins, the UK has something that belongs to India and it refuses to give it back. I'm talking about the Kohinoor, one of the world's largest cut diamonds. It is generally considered priceless, a jewel whose value cannot be quantified, but it's safe to say that the Kohinoor is the world's most expensive diamond. It belongs to India, but is currently languishing in Britain, on the crown of the Queen Mother. The United Kingdom knows that the Kohinoor can land it in an awkward position. And that is why it won't be used in the coronation of King Charles and his wife Camilla this May. You heard that. The British know that the Kohinoor is hardly something they can flaunt, and so they've decided to not use it during the coronation ceremony of their next king and queen consort. King Charles's wife, Queen Consort Camilla, has apparently chosen a crown for the coronation, and it doesn't have the Kohinoor. Instead, Camilla has chosen the Queen Mary crown. It was a replica, a duplicate of sorts, of the original Kohinoor. Now, we don't know if the replica will be retained in the crown, but the original fountain of light, as it is called, will not be part of the coronation. The Brits are making a big deal out of Camilla's choice of crown. I have a statement from the Buckingham Palace. This is what it says. The choice of Queen Mary's crown by Her Majesty is the first time in recent history that an existing crown will be used for the coronation of a consort instead of a new commission being made in the interests of sustainability and efficiency. Sustainability and efficiency, they say, how very noble. On the face of it, it's a cost-cutting measure. But there's more to the story. The Kohinoor is stolen. It is controversial. And it's hardly a choice now. It comes with a kind of baggage that the British monarchy can ill afford. The kind of baggage that can set off a diplomatic brawl between India and the UK. Britain has an Indian origin Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak is careful to not set off a diplomatic storm with India, not over something that was looted from India and which India still claims ownership of. Last October, India's Foreign Ministry spokesperson was asked when the Kohinoor would return to India. Here's what Arindam Bagchi said, and I'm quoting. We have said that we have been raising the matter from time to time with the UK government, and we will continue to explore ways and means for obtaining a satisfactory resolution of the matter. When Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister, Indians were jubilant. Social media was flooded with jokes and memes. Indians were convinced that their chance to get the Kohinoor back was now. We say, hang in there. Not showing of the Kohinoor at the coronation ceremony is a step in the right direction, but the Brits can hardly make a virtue of it. The messaging from India has been very, very clear. A BJP spokesperson recently said, Camilla's coronation and the use of the Kohinoor crown jewel brings back painful memories of the colonial past. Safe to assume, the UK is not particularly inclined to bring those memories back. The Kohinoor is now part of the crown jewels of the United Kingdom. It was seized by the East India Company in 1849. It was a gift that the company gave to Queen Victoria. She wore it in a brooch. After Queen Victoria's death, the Kohinoor came down to Queen Alexandra. Then, in 1937, the diamond was transferred to the crown of the Queen Mother. Who was the Queen Mother? Queen Elizabeth II's mother. That's the brief British history of the Kohinoor, but India has a long and deep connection with it. It is said to have been mined in the Middle Ages during the reign of the Kakatiya dynasty. Legend suggests that the Kohinoor was in fact called the Syamantak money, or at least that's what it was called in India before it got a Persian rebranding. It has been described as a magical jewel in ancient Indian texts, but the first verifiable record of the Kohinoor's existence dates back only to 1740. The Kohinoor is said to have been one of the many precious stones embedded in the Mughal peacock throne. Then came Nader Shah from Iran. He plundered and looted India, took the Kohinoor with him. After his death, the diamond fell to Ahmad Shah Durrani, the founder of the Afghan Empire. After Durrani, it came in the hands of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the founder of the Sikh Empire. It stayed in the Sikh Empire for quite some time. After the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1849, Punjab was taken by the British. They came up with the last Treaty of Lahore, and in that treaty, the Brits stipulated that the Kohinoor must be surrendered to them. That's how the diamond landed in London. India has been pressing the UK to return it. London has been ignoring these calls. The first demand was made in 1947, then another request was shot off in 1953. Any guesses how the British responded? They simply rejected India's requests. They said the ownership of the Kohinoor was quote-unquote non-negotiable. In the year 2000, several Indian lawmakers signed a letter calling for the Kohinoor to be returned. By now, UK officials started parroting a strange line. They said there were too many claims on the Kohinoor, and that it was impossible to identify the diamond's rightful owner. Basically, they were saying that they don't know who the Kohinoor actually belongs to, so they'll happily keep it in their possession. In 2016, India's Ministry of Culture said it would make all possible efforts to get the diamond back. But everyone's really slow. It took 150 years for the British to stop flaunting the Kohinoor. One wonders how many years it will take them to give it back to India. Scriptures say God created the family and children are a gift from Him. But they're a tricky gift. Managing children is not all fun and games, especially when video games are involved. Imagine a child brandishing a cleaver at you simply because you did not allow him to play online games. Doesn't sound fun at all. And we're not playing games here. This is exactly what happened in China. A father did not let his son play video games. This is a primary school kid we're talking about. His father took away his phone. The child became furious. He started threatening the father with a meat chopper, screaming, "Give it back to me," obviously referring to the phone. The boy continued doing this before the man overpowered him. He took away the chopper, much like we imagine the phone was taken away in the first place. A video of this shocking standoff has gone viral in China. It has been viewed by more than 7 million people. This happened as school began after the end of winter holidays. Every winter and summer break, the seasonal change doesn't just bring allergies with it, it also sparks the video game debate. It's fairly common in China. So is mobile game addiction among children and teenagers. China is the world's largest video game market. It has more than 700 million gamers across platforms. Gaming addiction is serious, so much so that the government came up with new laws. Beijing implemented strict measures in August 2021. This crackdown included a number of rules, like tight grip on online content and playing time restrictions for children. Also, a temporary freeze on new games. Last year, domestic games got just 462 licenses. The year before, that number was 755. So China is limiting the number of and access to video games. And it says this crackdown has brought positive results. China has declared a victory over gaming addiction in minors. It says more than 75% minors have limited their playing time to 3 hours a week, and this problem has been quote-unquote basically solved. But soon after the announcement, this happened. China granted licenses to 44 imported games, the first such approvals in 18 months. This thaw in industry crackdown also followed an article in the People's Daily, which is the Chinese Communist Party's mouthpiece. It said the gaming industry is of great significance to China. It helps the country's industrial layout and tech innovation. Which makes us wonder, is this a curious case of gaming the system itself? With good PR, it seems like the problem has vanished. But government aside, Let's talk about mobile gaming companies in the country. They say they want to make a positive impact. What have they done about it? They followed the government and introduced new rules, like what? Limiting the playing time for children and confirming their age. So a player must now upload an identity card. They even require facial recognition to prove their age. Take the example of Tencent Games. It is China's largest producer of mobile games. It has restricted the gaming timings from 8 to 9 p.m., but these measures are not enough. Children simply use their parents' phones to bypass the rules. They even secretly make payments on games to access more features. By the looks of it, gaming addiction is not going away anytime soon, and China is not the only country facing this issue. The gaming industry is booming the world over. This expansion was driven by the pandemic. Many gamers picked up their controllers and smartphones to escape boredom in lockdowns. And the numbers say it all. The market expanded by 26% between 2019 and 2021. China and the US dominated the market in 2021. They accounted for about half of all gaming revenues. But future growth will be seen in other nations. Projections say the global gaming industry could be worth $321 billion by 2026. The market will expand the fastest in Turkey, of all places. It will see an average growth of about 24% by 2026, followed by Pakistan, average growth of about 22%. And then India. Yes, we're not far behind. Our expansion could be about 18%. 2022 ended with about 396 million gamers in India. The overall Indian gaming market is valued at more than $2.5 billion. The global gaming industry is swimming in cash. But what about the toll it takes on children? Experts say gaming addiction in minors is one of the leading causes behind rising myopia, that short-sightedness, mental health problems, poor concentration, and sleep disorders. It's a serious issue, and it ails gamers across the world. So much so that gaming addiction has its own name. It's called the gaming disorder. The World Health Organization defined it as a pattern of gaming behavior characterized by impaired control over gaming. It's when gaming gets an increased priority over all other interests. It only affects a small population of gamers, but knowing more about it can help prevent potential harm. Parents can play a role here. They can monitor and limit the games that their children play. Simple actions like keeping the gaming console in a different room can reduce its use. Also notice changes in behavioral patterns after excessive gaming. And talk to children about staying safe online. Teachers can also play a part here. Spreading more awareness, opening channels of communication about gaming can go a long way. The fact of the matter is, video games are here to stay, and video games are not all bad. They can strengthen cognitive skills and teach you social skills like teamwork. But like all things, only if done in moderation. That is the key, gaming in moderation. Think about it. Are you playing the game, or is it playing you? After all, an army of cleaver-wielding minions does not sound too good for the society. And now let's turn our attention to a disease that is ravaging the world, one that's going to get worse over time. There may be many candidates for this description, but the disease I'm talking about is diabetes. Its prevalence is growing rapidly. By 2045, the number of diabetes patients could be more than 780 million the world over. People in emerging economies are particularly vulnerable. In Asia and Africa, diabetes will affect more than 560 million people, which is a 50% rise compared to 2021. India in the immediate neighborhood is expected to see a 70% rise in cases. Why is this happening? And what can be done to stem the tide? Here's a report.
Diabetes is on the rise globally. Millions are diagnosed with it every year. It led to 6.7 million deaths in 2021, and hundreds of millions are at an increased risk of developing it, especially those living in emerging economies. Let's start with what diabetes is. It's when your body cannot produce enough of the hormone insulin. Insulin is needed to keep your blood sugar in check. When your body fails to make enough insulin, blood sugar levels rise. This leads to your blood vessels getting damaged. It increases the risk of heart disease. There are two variants of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is genetic. Some people cannot produce enough insulin from an early age. There's not much that can be done except taking regular medication. Then there's type 2 diabetes. It's considered a lifestyle disease. It's when your body cannot regulate blood sugar levels due to excess weight or a lack of physical activity. Type 2 makes up about 90% of all diabetes cases, and this is the variant that's on the rise. There are two main reasons for it. The first is economic growth. Parts of Asia and Africa have seen tremendous growth this century. This has led to people being able to afford more food. But Asians and Africans aren't eating more traditional, healthy, low-calorie and low-fat food. Often, people choose to eat food high on sugar. The emergence of global food chains offering junk food has exacerbated the problem. People consume more sugar than their bodies require, leading to weight gain and then diabetes. Thus, Asia and Africa are expected to bear the brunt of new diabetes cases. The number of diabetes patients could touch 560 million here by 2045. That's more than the total number of diabetes patients in the world in 2021. It's an increase of 50%. The increase will be similar in South America. For North America, it's about 24%. The figure for Europe is about 13%. We had mentioned there were two main reasons for the rise of diabetes. The second reason is the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant lockdowns. The restrictions placed on mobility led to many gaining weight, and researchers say physical activity levels haven't bounced back even after the restrictions were lifted. A study looks at steps tracked via smartphone apps. People are walking 10% less than pre-pandemic levels. The figure is 30% less in Asia. Average exercise levels are down in Europe and North America as well. If physical activity levels don't rise, diabetes will. So how can we address the challenge posed by diabetes? We all know the standard advice: eat healthy and exercise. But governments can step in too. After all, diabetes led to almost $1 trillion in healthcare expenditure in 2021. Money that could have gone to other economic activities. Not to mention, fit and healthy citizens are generally more productive for a nation. Some nations have implemented a sugar tax to combat diabetes. Sugary drinks in particular have been targeted. Making these beverages more expensive is one way to try and reduce their consumption. But it's still the tip of the iceberg when it comes to dealing with the menace of diabetes.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Today is all about weird and wonderful news stories. We're sure you know about skateboarding. But do you know about fingerboarding? A fingerboard is a scaled-down replica of a skateboard. Skaters ride it with their fingers. Fingerboarding pros gathered for an event in LA, and oddly enough, it looked fun. In other news, researchers have developed a shape-shifting robot that imitates turtles. In Italy, a carnival has marked its 150th anniversary. It had everything from gigantic gorillas to gas masks. And Native Americans across the US joined the Pow Wow Festival. It is a traditional gathering of American Indians where tribes reconnect. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Are we all going? Oh my God. Right now.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwala. Top story, another brutal killing similar to the Shraddha murder case has come to light in the national capital. The body of a 25-year-old woman named Nikki Yadav was found inside a freezer at her dhaba in southwest Delhi's Najafgarh. She was murdered by her boyfriend, a man named Sahil Gehlot, who strangled her to death. He owned the dhaba where he dumped the body and shockingly attended his wedding the same day he committed the murder. Sahil and Nikki were in a relationship since 2018 and even lived together, but he kept the relationship hidden from his family, who arranged his marriage to another woman. Police say he killed her after she confronted him about his engagement and marriage to another woman. The post-mortem report has revealed death due to strangulation and no other injury marks were found on Nikki's body. Sahil Gehlot has been sent to 5 days police custody. The capital has been shaken by this gruesome crime in the wake of the Shraddha murder case.
Accused Sahil has just reached the crime branch office. If you see Sahil, who is the main culprit in this entire case, and he is accused of in the manner in which he went ahead and killed Nikki. I'll just try and get a number. Sahil, आपको शर्म आ रही है? आपने जिस तरह का
In the interrogation that has happened, what are the details that he has revealed till now, and whatever he has said, are those details being corroborated with evidences, and is his statement coming out to be true?
We have taken 5 days to verify his statement. We have sent multiple teams to check CCTV footage of the route.